All right, we are live. I made sure to be 1 minute late exactly for you guys. We've got Seth Page here. We've got Pool Boy, who is a staple on the show. Of course, he has been on 100% of the episodes. Really, my right-hand man.
I was like a staple. How many shows have you
Yeah,
had?
2.
Nice.
But the Glintons were right. Garrett, I had always told her whenever I'd interview athletes, I was terrified to go live. But then once you do it once, it's like, oh, let's do it again tomorrow. So
you just have to have a genuine sense of curiosity. If you go into it trying to be this like interviewer, you're going to look like an idiot. You just have to ask the questions that are interesting to you, and then conversation's great. That's what I've learned.
And I have to make sure I pull up Augustus so he doesn't get too wild. The thing I like about Augustus is he says what's ever on his mind. Augustus, I'm not going to say who, but because of everything that happened, there are a few very well-known athletes that are supposed to come on. I want you to be there so that you can ask some crazy questions. Hopefully not too crazy. Now, how do I get rid of you? Gosh darn it, you're going to be up there forever. All right, I got it. All right, so today, we're going to talk about what everybody's talking about. Seth, I did see your short video. I thought it was really good. I did not see the Glintons podcast, which I wanted to watch. I purposely didn't because I don't like getting other thoughts in my head going in. There's a lot going around right now. I don't necessarily want to focus a ton on the tragedy. I do want to talk about like what CrossFit looks like going forward. And I can't really do that on my own. I started in 2021. I have strong opinions. I like to come on here and communicate and start conversations, but I wasn't going to do this unless I got some guys who have been around the space for a long time. And do you guys just mind real quick giving us your background about how long you've done CrossFit and what your role in it is for anybody here who might be new?
Sure. I got into it in 2008. By 2009, my interest was pretty heavily focused on the CrossFit Games as it was like in its infancy. I was drawn to it aggressively. And because where I was at up in the Northeast, there wasn't a lot of people who are quite into it yet. It hadn't swept across the country the way that it has across the world now. So we were kind of early in the game, got some friends into it with me. I realized quickly I was not going to be that athlete, but I found people who were. So I was really coach focused from the start, learning how to program, learning how to do everything. So over the years, I just kind of, wrote programming with my previous company, Misfit, probably coached and programmed for 24 individual games athletes at this point, countless teams, masters, other things, and then kind of branched out on my own later on. But yeah, been to about 10 CrossFit Games live, coached athletes for 12 years or so plus at the CrossFit Games, but that's about it.
That's awesome. And one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on, it's so difficult to catch up on CrossFit history when you weren't there. There's something odd about it. It's hard to get it to stick. I want to know, so when John Young and a few people get on, yourself, you can spit off CrossFit history like it's nothing. Anything from this point forward, I feel like I'll remember. But basically, one of the recent just endeavors into the history has been watching what you've been doing, going over the old CrossFit Games. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on to talk about some historical things. Mike, you're up.
I got into CrossFit 2012. I joined around the time when the Open was happening. And I just remember people in the gym talking about it. And I was wondering, what the hell is this Open that everyone's talking about? And funny enough, flash forward to 2018, I was on a team which qualified to regionals. I was under Diablo CrossFit at the time, owned by Craig Howard, which most people in this chat and watching the show probably know. And it's actually funny because our coach at the time, Seth, you'll like the story, was Wes Pyatt. And Wes Pyatt at the time was still competing. And I believe he had hired you as a coach, which is then how I got into doing Misfit athletics. So I followed from, I no longer follow Misfit anymore, but from like Misfit or from that point on in 2018, all the way up until like a few months ago, I was doing Misfit all the way up to that point. So it was kind of interesting how this kind of story has gone around.
It's a
So-
small
connection.
CrossFit world.
It's a very
super
small world,
small.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very small. What's so funny too is I still remember you. I don't know if it was you or someone else, but when you had left Misfit, I remember it was someone from Jump Shit DM'd me and was like, "Hey, starting this new thing. Was wondering if you'd like to come join the program." And I
My
thought that was
wife
kinda
went
funny.
wild with the DMs when
That's
things
probably what it
when
was.
things went south with that
Mhm.
company and I had to start over. She went wild with it. Everyone that I had ever had any contact with got a DM. Just letting
Yeah.
you know because
That's
they're
so
not going to
funny.
let you know. Yeah,
And I also thought the name was very awesome. Was very funny given
fitting.
given the situation. That was cool. And then last year, I went to semis on a team. If you guys watch yesterday's show, John Young does not count that as being a semifinal athlete. So I'm still trying to make it as an individual. There you go.
Heidi had an interesting question here, real quick before we get started. For you, I believe, Seth.
Be a pro versus a coach. What do you mean? As an athlete?
I think, for me, like having talked now to a few athletes and things like that, I know for me, the curiosity is how quickly do you know if you're going to be good enough to pursue at least like being on the cusp?
Yeah, like for example, I think a better way to ask it is like I'm a very competent, confident CrossFit coach. You can throw me into any affiliate and I'll have no insecurities about just jumping in and coaching. But if someone were to be like, "Hey, Mike, I'm trying to make it to semis. Would you coach me?" I would be so insecure. I wouldn't have the confidence. So I guess that's maybe how a better way of looking at Heidi's question.
Yeah, so I knew right away, like I had certain things I was good at when I was into CrossFit. Like, I mean, I still work out and do it all the time. I've been doing it for 16 years now almost, but I knew right away that my strength levels, the way I moved a barbell, things like that would improve, but they would never be at any sort of special level. So I just kind of picked the things I like to do and worked hard and did my one and done workout, but focused more on coaching because I was so obsessed with the sport. So the coaching became my outlet early on. And it wasn't really a big deal back then to just say, "Hey, I'm going to work with athletes and try to coach them to the highest level." Because the highest level for a lot was getting them to something, there was regionals was like, I wouldn't say it's not hard, but you could take somebody with a basic base. And if they were going to focus on training for that year, those 2 years, you could get someone to regionals. I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case nowadays. So I just got in at a time where it was easy for me to be confident about like, "Hey, I think we can figure this out together." And then once you get a few people through, you're like, "Hey, I'm starting to figure it out. Hey, I'm starting to figure out more." And then you just build your own system that's then proven to just push people through that are willing to put the time and effort in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that you went back that far. I mean, I knew you were kind of like an OG, but I did not know it actually went back that far. So it's great to have you for this in particular. The first thing I want to get into, just touching on this, you guys were not there. Do you feel like there's a difference between those who were at the games and those who were at home? Do you sense a different feeling from those two groups at all? Are you picking up on that, or would you say no? Either one.
Go ahead, Mike.
Am I picking up that?
I'm just wondering if there's a different feeling for those who were watching at home.
I can give you individually. Yeah. So individually, for me, I am sad I missed the games because I am so like overwhelmed about the situation that what took place with Lazar that like I feel like I would have done better personally to be with everybody else. Everybody and anybody. I would have liked to have just talked immediately with people as opposed to feeling isolated and only talking to a couple very, very close friends of mine about the situation. I feel like the community aspect would have helped me start to get over it faster. Well, I don't want to say get over it in a sense that like I'm moving on, but move through the pain and start to process my thoughts and how to move forward from that sort of thing. So that aspect I think is probably felt by a lot of people who are at home, witnessed, didn't know how to handle it, don't know what to think about the games moving forward after that moment, whereas people there can start to grasp things a little more because they're talking about it more.
Yeah, I was going to kind of allude to that a little bit too. I feel like, and this is just my perspective from watching it at home, that it probably is a little bit more healing actually being there because you're amongst your friends, family, the community, the energy. I feel like I feel like more anger from the community is coming from probably the people that weren't there, because it probably was a little bit more traumatic for them because we watched it on the live stream, right? And
That's a
versus
good point. I didn't think about that.
versus being like on the sideline. Maybe you were at the event,
Yeah.
but probably we were so focused on the athletes coming across the finish line, when like it's a clear view shot on the live stream of Lazar's tragic situation there. So I feel like maybe it was a little bit more traumatic for those watching it, because I mean, personally, I've dealt with, I'm sure everyone's dealt with death in their life, but I've never actually seen someone die, and so that was a pretty traumatic to think like, hey, I just watched someone literally drown on live television. So the fact that viewers at home watched the traumatic incident and then didn't really have the community alongside with them to lean on and begin whatever healing process that may have been for them.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. In my head, I thought, oh, I was at the lake. It's way more traumatic for all of us. I actually would agree with you. And just the only difference that I saw was that I got to see, okay, so I saw something horrible happened, but then there was like a mini cycle of how the grieving process and healing occurs, right? It was just crazy how you got to see the CrossFit community, right? I didn't really know anybody there. I was supposed to come with my family. They ended up staying at home, and I sent a message to Scott from Clydesdale. And we met up at a coffee shop. He was there with Amanda Hari, and then one table over, it was Dylan, Ariel, and Danny Spiegel, actually, who was really nice. And then it was Chase and Adrian. They were over in a different corner, but there was like multiple groups of people there just working through things. And we were there for 5 hours. If that hadn't happened, I was just in my hotel room by myself. I don't even know why. It's a very strange thing. I don't know why I was crying, because I don't really cry, and I didn't know the guy. I called my wife in the car an hour later, and I just started bawling. And I try, I don't know. I got that weird thing where I try not to like cry in front of my wife. That's just me. Maybe I'm weird with emotion, but I'm like, where the heck did that come from? And so something happened, and I'm not sure what it was, but then seeing the way that the community, who doesn't even know me, was just like there for me. They know me from messages and from online. That was awesome. So for me, that's why I have this in my mind. Like, I respect Hiller a ton. He probably has influenced me more than anyone else. I was watching a show 2 years ago, Natty or Nots, during COVID or whatnot. I'm like, oh, a guy in his garage can do a podcast. It's one of the first times I've strongly disagreed with him. And I think he would probably disagree with this, but I think it's because I was there and I saw the response to it. Yeah, I don't know. So that was a tough one, seeing Hiller with such a differing opinion.
I mean, someone like him who is so invested in the community, whether you like his approach or not, he is obsessive about what's going on every moment. And maybe he feels like he's been screaming from the mountaintop for years about things having to be different. Again, agree with him or don't agree with him, that's beside the point. But when you're that emotionally invested, which he is, this has got to hit hard. And so, like, whatever your opinion is, right or wrong, indifferent, whatever, there's no right or wrong. Like, he's feeling it. He's feeling it on a high level of emotion, like everybody, and everyone does it a little differently. So it's just fine. I think I think we have to have, I mean, it's great to have these conversations now and as they're going on, but I think the conversations will get better as time passes. I think once we start to settle in and we start getting control of ourselves again a little bit, and being more open to rationale and reason, and having real discussions and less emotional and more, things will get better in terms of discussion for everybody. I hope.
Yeah. Like yesterday, I got a comment on I have a picture of me and Dave on my Instagram, and someone left a comment that just said a murderer and his simp. So people are very emotional.
Yeah,
right now.
I talked to an athlete, and I won't say who in case he doesn't want to know or doesn't want people to know, but this athlete's not that well known. He was competing as an individual. And I just spent a brief moment with him. And he had got a message saying, basically an Instagram message. He said, I haven't even told my wife this. I read it this morning saying, you swam over his dead body and did nothing. You killed a man or something like that. And you could see in it, you could see in his face, like, you could see in his face, like how tore up he was over that. You could see that it did what the intention was and got that in his head. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit because he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet.
That thought is probably already in people's heads. I've already put myself in everyone's shoes in my own head, and so now you're forcing someone to relive it. They went through it, they felt it, they had their feeling, and then you're reminding them of the thought that they already created, and that it feels more and more real every time someone throws that in your face for no reason.
Validates it. What thought you probably are justified in pushing out of your head, they come in and then they bring it back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that when we have differing opinions that we recognize something. I think the one thing I'm seeing with people arguing is assumed motives. I don't think that's fair to ever do. Well, I shouldn't say ever, but I think it's rarely fair to assume motives or assume somebody's being fake, even if you suspect it. People, obviously, we said respond to grief differently, but like, you can disagree with what Hiller's been posting, for instance. I don't for 1 second question that he's genuine, that he's hurt. None of that comes through my mind at all. And I think we should try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I feel like I tried to think about this morning, what is it that's causing people to go after each other on this? And I do feel like one of the main things is just assuming where people are coming from, or that they have some sort of nefarious motive.
I would maybe I would say the type of person that is willing to publicly say something disgusting like that to somebody else has a whole lot of deep-seated shit going on already. So like they've decided this is another outlet, something that they want to lash out. And anytime someone's lashing out, it's typically a them issue, not the other person, whether they agree or not. And so you're seeing a lot of,
that's a good point,
low emotional IQ spilling into the internet over a very heated and very controversial situation. I mean, there's a lot we're going to learn about what actually happened here over the next weeks and months that will, again, create a whole nother flood of shit waves on the internet. And and it's just part of the process, unfortunately, with social media.
You bring up something that I don't have written down, and that's what people have been talking about this. I'd love to hear you both speak on this. What changes when we get like the autopsy or whatnot? People have mentioned, well, what if he had a heart issue or whatnot? To me, I don't think anything changes because they weren't prepared. Does anything change if it was, I don't even like talking about this, but if it was drowning versus a heart attack, for instance, does anything change?
No.
What could we find out? Things like what was recommended, what the law required.
The cause of what made him drown is irrelevant.
Okay.
Let's say even if he had a heart attack,
the
fact that there was no one there to pull him out of the water,
they didn't get in the water. You still, they didn't know this
is the issue. And I kind of I said this to a few people where I would read some pretty outlandish comments about firing Dave and firing Don, because I just it just made me bring back to the memory of all the social justice warriors who pushed out like Greg Glassman, and the domino effect of private equity coming in, buying the business, cutting costs, seeing the effects of cutting costs and how it brought down the value that affiliates saw that they were getting. We would see, I mean, it was apparent, right, in terms of like the media. We saw the outcome of what cutting costs would look like. And finally, I think we saw the straw that broke the camel's back of, hey, this is the product of all the freaking money that, the business has been trying to cut because it's trying to make it look more appealing to another business to sell. And it's like they had volunteers when they should have had trained professionals out there as lifeguards. And it's just like, okay, people want to see guys like Dave and Don fired. I'm like, is that really the answer? Like, is that going to not have an even potentially worse outcome 5, 6, 7 years, down the road? Because I'll be honest, the only reason why I'm still quote protecting the brand and affiliating with the brand is because someone like Dave is in leadership. If Dave gets fired, I don't have any more trust in the brand or company. I'll probably not give a fuck if affiliates de-affiliate and go from there.
I'm scared of that happening. Actually, I've got that on the list. Let's come back to the Dave thing in a second here. As far as, I don't know, since I didn't watch Glinton's and I haven't talked to you about it, Mike, I don't know your opinions on this. I'm sorry. I think you did share it in the Instagram post, but should it have been shut down? What are your thoughts on that, Seth?
Oh man, that's so tough.
Jeez.
I know.
Again, the only thing, I've said this a couple times, so I'm just kind of sticking to this until I can kind of learn more. But the only thing I can say is that because it wasn't shut down, the people that were there were gathered in the greatest gathering of community members for CrossFit possible. So the people that were there are able to more quickly discuss, work through things, make connections with people. Like you had mentioned, you made a connection with Scott, and now you're probably able to reach out to him and lean on him if needed, and vice versa. So those sort of things may not have taken place if they just announced everything's closed, games are done, Bender Village is done, everyone go home. If you do that, you leave a lot of people hanging with the grief of what happened potentially for a lot longer, and more frustration and more this. So I'm not saying that there is a correct answer to stop them or not, but what I am saying is the only positive I do see is the lasting memories from that community members and athletes will have with them. That's in Lazar's honor. So that's what that's all I can say.
Yeah, my initial thought was they should have canceled. They should have canceled it. And then I want to say my opinion kind of skewed and was changed a little bit once more information. I don't want to say more information, but like once like my initial emotional reaction kind of settled down, I was more open to the idea of them continuing, and the transparency of Dave about it.
Yeah,
Discussing like, hey, we brought the athletes in, discussed it, talked to Luca, talked to his family about it. Then I was more open to the idea of them continuing on. Looking back, I feel like they probably should have canceled. They should have canceled it.
Yeah, I side on
because it was just weird. It was just, at least for me watching the whole time, it was weird. None of it really felt
to watch.
Yeah, none of it really felt. I don't know if genuine was the right word, but it just. I think what really put it over for me was just the closing final event. Like when Tia won, it was so weird back home watching it. It's like they didn't even announce second or third. And
that's right. That was weird.
And the only reason why they even did the men was because it was so close.
Yep.
And even like Tia's post interview was so awkward and weird. And like, I know she didn't mean it the way people took it, which is retarded. But like when she said this is the best one yet, like I know what she meant by that. She meant it because she's a mom now, and her daughter was there to witness it.
Everybody's like walking on eggshells.
Yeah, but that was like, oof, that didn't sound good.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Well, I mean, CrossFit itself, especially competing at the level they're competing at, is a highly emotional thing. You have to be able to like elevate your emotions to a certain degree to be able to put the energy and focus forward that they do to be able to compete at that level. And so when you're done a workout and you do well, you get excited naturally. It's a dump of your emotions. When you do poorly, you become disappointed naturally. It's been ingrained in you for years and years of this training and competing. And so now when you have a celebration at the end when someone does good, even a simple fist pump looks off-putting when everybody else is like, what? How could you celebrate? But it's just a reaction. It's another emotional reaction. And so those two things are like oil and water in that moment. And it makes it really hard to, I don't know, as a fan perspective, whatever, it's like, what do you give them? Are you like excited for the athlete that did good? Or are you like, what are you doing? Why would you like, it's just, it's too confusing. It's mixed messaging in a sport that requires that excitement and emotion. That's what makes it really hard. And you can't fault the athlete. You asked them to go back out there and do that. And then they did it and they have whatever they did. And like, so it's
and even the fact, like on such a small, we don't think about it this way. What do we do when we need an escape. We work out. That's one of the things we do, right? And I think it was Vellner who said it. He or Fikowski, one of them, they even mentioned that it's good to get a workout in as an escape when referring to finishing their workouts at the games. But the only question for me, so my answer is that I do agree with it having continued. The only question for me is this. It's like things do happen, tragedies happen all the time, and at some point you have to get back to life. The only question for me is how quickly do you do that? You cannot stay in a certain place of not moving forward for weeks and months, and it's different for every situation depending on how close you were to it. In this case, I didn't see another option. So I'm not steadfast 100% on that, but I did like that they moved it forward. And I think it was probably Dave. Seeing Dave's sincerity, I believe he's 100% sincere. You guys saw. I mean, I went down and shook his hand at one moment. He knows me a little bit. It was very clear that he was sincere. I don't know about everybody else. I think he gives a crap is what I'm saying. So. All right. So here's what I'm curious, Seth, and this is going to be your area. I know I can't rattle them off. There's nothing that's been like this, but we have been in situations in the past where safety has been a concern. You've had your series on the games and you've talked about these things. Besides this, have there ever been times that can you think of any off the top of your head, stories or things that were televised where somebody literally could have died?
I mean, unfortunately, I don't even want to bring it up, but just like coming back to more swimming, the swimming around the pier in the ocean early on when CrossFitters were even less experienced in this. I mean, I was at the games many times. My wife competed at the games where they had to swim around the pier. Like that, people who are very uncomfortable in open water, especially the ocean, their irrational fear of sharks, like they have all this stuff going on. And then they've never had a mass entry before. Like they've never done like a triathlon where you're flying in the water, you're getting kicked in the face. Early CrossFitters were not really that great at that. I mean, there's plenty who had experience, but plenty who had never done that. And they had just crammed kind of swimming in last minute. And they did long ocean swims back in the day, but thankfully nothing serious ever happened. Many people were pulled out of the water back then. They were pulled on.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah. Many, even back, if you look at the Pendleton thing, I just did that with Scott Panchek. And I think it was, I might be wrong about the athlete. I think it was Orlando Trejo. He was one of the Latin America athletes from back in the day. It may have been somebody else, but somebody got pulled out within the first few minutes of Pendleton because they were panic swimming and they got pulled right up onto a rescue craft, and I think their games were over at that point. But
I think you're right. I think it was Orlando, and I remember they allowed him to continue to compete, but his scores didn't count.
That could have been it. That could have been it. Yeah. But yeah, and there are other athletes. I'm just remembering him off the top of my head. Other athletes have failed to swim in the past and been pulled out.
Salo had some eardrum issue too.
That's right.
The swim also.
Versus eardrum entering the water. That's right.
Really?
Damn. See, I'm old school too, like you. Let's go.
Yeah. Other than the swim, though, I mean, obviously you have the heat exhaustion fears of the midday Murph. The first year they did that.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Seth,
no.
but I think you even made made a point though too. Like those athletes were safely pulled out of the water.
Yeah.
So there were proper safety measures.
Yeah.
What did the setup look like? As far as personnel, was there a lot more?
I don't know numbers, but there's fire and rescue on the beach, jet skis in the water, paddle boarders in the water. There was the whole, everything you would expect to see. Again, I've done a few triathlons, I've done a few swim run races, all the stuff that I expect to see there. I mean, I did a race that I was talking about on the show yesterday with the Glintons, crazy race, swim run, like in and out of the water. And there was Coast Guard there. Like there was boats on every area of this long, crazy course through islands. And every time I got in the water, there were boats in the water. There were paddle boarders, people pointing to where you go. So like still crazy, but most people have good safety precautions. And again, so let me just say this. Sorry. I'm not saying that they didn't have safety precautions either at the games. Maybe they did. Maybe they ticked every single box, but for whatever reason, the response just wasn't there.
Interesting. Now
I saw two paddle boarders 10 feet from him. So they were there.
I don't think they had flotation devices even. I don't know that they could have done much, and we don't know their training, so
we don't. It's all
we'll find that out
speculation.
later. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
but I mean, everyone that, at least from what I'm hearing, that were there, were saying like the lifeguards were just watching the event. They weren't actually watching the athletes. And like I'm a former lifeguard, and like I remember specifically times where like my first year as a lifeguard, I remember, I'd be on stand, and I remember my I don't know if my manager at the time was just trying to like fuck with me, or like test me, but he like called my name out, and I remember I literally did one of these and turned, and he immediately started yelling at me like don't fucking, like, he didn't say fucking, but like I'm sure he wanted to, but like, you don't take your eyes off the water. Like if someone calls your name, you respond like what, or verbally, like, but you keep looking, at your water. If someone's trying to get your attention, you just verbally respond back to them. But you never take your eyes off the water. And
Dude,
I think those lifeguards were like, oh, Tia's across the line, let's go.
the lifeguards in Hawaii are crazy, man. They're like, they know that people who
That
are not
water.
really equipped for the water are going to go in no matter how many signs you put up. And they are like
Bro.
on it. They're like hawks pulling people out of the water every day out here.
Hawaii is not, so I've only been there once, and it wasn't even that bad. Like it wasn't the season where you guys have all the big surf competitions and all that. And that water was kind of rough, man. I was just snorkeling, and I was getting, I must not be a very good swimmer, because I was getting tossed, man. It's the water there, I would imagine you'd have to have some pretty trained folks out there, because it can get rough. I am correct in that, right? Hawaii is pretty difficult swimming conditions compared to other places.
It depends where you are exactly on which island, but yeah, of course they have surf, like you said, North Shore and Oahu has surf competitions every year.
That's where
huge
I was
waves. Yeah, for sure.
People
go in that water.
Yeah, I was at Turtle Bay, and it wasn't a bad day. I was surprised because it wasn't supposed to be a bad day, and it was still getting me a little bit. So,
and people still enter. They just go in the water.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's my point. There were no warnings, and it was still kind of bad. I can only imagine the days where you're getting warnings. The interesting thing is, did you guys see? So I talked to Jack Rosema, who's not a great swimmer. He came in last in the event, and I was just kind of asking him about, since I don't have a swimming background, about this thing that keeps getting brought up about when you're in the water, sort of human nature to have some level of panic, right? And he said he was never in legitimate danger of drowning, but he was panicking in a way that he was not able to keep his head in the water. Assuming my heart keeps beating, I can side stroke for hours if my life depended on it, but it's very slow. And then he said Adler was backstroking. Did you guys see that? Can you guys confirm that? He said Adler. I would have thought they'd be doing freestyle the whole time. Am I off in that?
I didn't see it, but it doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay.
I just I do think that swimming is under represented in just the training in general, and it's really a supplemental thing that people use when they're either going to Wadapalooza or they're going to the games. Most people are not going out of their way to swim, and those who know they have to have it coming up, again, it's not a year-round thing like a barbell. They're just, for some it is, but it's not common. Mm-hmm. And so like it's not surprising that a little bit extra heat, a little bit of higher intensity on a run would surprise you with your heart rate not coming down as quick as you anticipate. And then you have to abandon freestyle when you're not super efficient, because one thing that people don't practice, they get in the pool, and when you're breathing, there's a whole bunch of, swimming takes a massive amount of skill. You count a certain number of breaths with strokes, depending on your comfort level, how smooth you are, how good you are at processing oxygen. And the less efficient you are, the more work you're doing, and the more panicked you are, the less efficient you become. And then it's this downward spiral of just trying to doggy paddle your way to the finish. So it doesn't surprise me at all that people overexerted and were forced to side stroke, forced to backstroke, forced to just find a way to float and breathe before they could go back to freestyle, because they're not efficient enough to maintain. It's a high skill movement that people think, oh, I can just get in the water. It's not that.
That makes sense. Like Adler was like by fucking miles the first into the water, so he was probably just running his ass off, and then probably maybe underestimated, like, holy shit, so now the swim is a whole other beast. And he fell way behind on the swim. And I could speak from a little bit of experience, like me, when I swim, I have to breathe every 2 strokes, just because like I don't have necessarily a swimming background growing up, outside of me being a lifeguard, but I was never a water polo player or anything like that. So most people would say a 2-stroke breath is pretty inefficient, but it's just something that I'm most comfortable with. And I remember my first open water experience was at the NorCal Classic a few, years back. I've only ever had like swimming experience in a pool. And I remember I didn't even think about the temperature of the water as being a factor. And the lake that we swam in had ice runoff, and the temperature of the water just made it impossible to freestyle. So anytime I'd put my head under the water to try to do my normal stroke, like, no, that was it. I would immediately panic. And I mean, luckily I didn't freak out too bad, but there were definitely people around me. I remember asking for help from the kayaks and canoes and all that.
So you have been at these other competitions, Seth. I don't know if you have. I'm sure you've had athletes who have been. Have you guys noticed in retrospect at all if Wodapalooza, NorCal, have you guys looked into whether or not they looked like they had a more thorough setup than we did this year at the games? Are you guys familiar?
I mean, the first year I competed at Wodapalooza was the year they thought someone died. But luckily it was just someone that just freaked out and got out of the water, from what I heard. And
I remember that.
The years that I've done, I've done NorCal every year since it started, and they've always been really good about safety measures in terms of lifeguards, kayaks. I remember each year the swim, I can visually see kayakers out on the water, and I could hear them too talking to some of the swimmers that looked like they were like fucking struggling. They would like verbally continuously say like, hey, I'm right here if you need me. I'm right here if you need me. Like they would continuously speak with them. And then plus, NorCal's not the games, right? So they do allow athletes to wear life jackets if they want to. Obviously it's going to slow you down majorly swimming. So that's just something you have to deal with. And then even, since the incident has happened, was super curious to see what NorCal would do if they're going to cancel it, because it's September 4th is when
that's a really good point.
It's coming up soon. So I was like, shit, are they going to cancel it? But they just sent out an email today. They're not going to cancel it. They're making more safety measures. And I can already see a few comments on the Instagram, kind of like people are like, freaking out a little bit about it. So it's going to be interesting.
I didn't mean to bring up that one, but Heidi, I love you anyway. So yeah, apparently Adler, I don't know if you guys saw those comments I was bringing up, but apparently something in Talking Elite Fitness where he was talking about not remembering some of the swims, struggling. So I guess the backstroke part is apparently true. And that it was 86 degrees, apparently. That was my first thought is I was immediately looking up the temperature of the water at the time. And it was really warm. I remember texting that to Hiller. I was like, hey man, this might be, something that contributed to it. Yeah. You wonder if that was something that I'd have to imagine they were looking into that and just determine. I don't know.
See, that comment by Daniel was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like that type of shit is
I
stupid.
agree.
That's just stupid.
I don't hate you, Daniel. I know we all are going through things, but I do agree that I think Dave absolutely cares about safety. And I don't think, Dave isn't in charge of the company either. And he doesn't head up safety. We all think that Dave controls everything. He has power, but he does not control everything. He is the one that we look to for the games, right? Do you know what his actual title is? Is it director of the games or something like that? So the buck does kind of stop at him, which does worry me, because I do like Dave. I know there's varying opinions, but yeah, I agree that we can't say Dave doesn't care about safety. I don't think that's true.
No, that's the stupidest thing in the world. And just say that he just cares about making intense, grueling workouts. That's even stupider.
He does care about making intense, grueling workouts, but the thing is, like,
I would disagree with that. I don't think he cares about making intense, grueling workouts. He cares about making workouts appropriate in finding the fittest man or woman on earth.
Yeah. You don't feel like he ever tries to Seth, do you feel like I feel like he at least tries to raise the bar. These guys are getting better and better. Seth, do you think, when I say break, I don't mean literally break. Do you think he tries to beat the athletes and break them in a sense on one workout or some workouts and take them to their limits. And make, yeah.
So I do think the test for the fittest athlete on earth should be a grueling test, right? To hold the title should be grueling. It can be grueling and safe. And most of what has been done in the past, I think, is inherently safe. The problem is when it comes to issues like what happened this weekend, it only takes one little detail or one little failed reaction from somebody to then have everything that's ever been done be questioned, because that's the knee-jerk reaction. So I don't think that it's fair to say they have never considered safety or they don't care about it. Even if you just looked at a strict liability point of view from this, a company the size of CrossFit would never be okay with somebody throwing safety and liability into the wind. And obviously there's a lot more to that than just that. But so could things always be better and over the top with safety? I'm sure, because there have been plenty of concerns raised by, a lot of veteran athletes that have been in precarious situations, and not even just at the CrossFit Games, at other events too, where things happen and things get pointed out. The Ogar situation probably was 12, 13 years ago now, maybe, a long time ago. Doing things that people said were unsafe. Somebody just stacked the weights in the wrong place, and now we have to question everything when that happens. So these little details
That's a good point.
are crucially important.
Do you remember the next year too, Seth? Because that was the
hurdles?
OC Throwdown, right?
OC Throwdown.
And
they had the hurdles.
The next year.
Yeah, they just so the next year I think they had a whole bunch of high hurdles in place without boxes, and they blew up like half a dozen Achilles or something like that.
And not even that, but you just see people just eat shit over
that too. Hard. Yeah. So, and I have never seen something like that at the games. In fact, they have made moves over recent years that have been for athlete safety, that have got a bunch of criticism from the community for, you're taking it away, let them do sport. Like, sport has risk. Yes, it does. They're trying to find a balance, clearly. And again, this one incident, the only real horrible incident we've ever had at the games, obviously now forces us to put everything under a microscope, because we have to look. But it doesn't mean that safety wasn't a priority. So that's
a
just
great point.
It's unfair. Point. It's unfair.
Yeah. And plus, like, I've done testing for Dave for like twice. I did testing for him for the games a few years back. And then I did testing for like an online, workout. I forget what the purpose of it was. And then plus, like, one of my best friend, Rafa Sanson, he does testing for Dave. And so, like, I know the experience of it, and I can see visually the things that happens in his head when going through the process. And it's such a meticulous, and it's almost like I don't even know the word to describe, but he takes so much care in programming these events. And to say that he does it without caring much about an athlete's safety or a purpose of the workout, just to beat the shit out of him, I think is very ignorant to say.
Grant, can you pull up Sean M's comment there?
Sure.
Oh, are we gonna ask about Sean? Are we gonna ask?
No. I just
this one right here.
It's a fair statement. Yeah, nothing about the games is inherently safe. It's always going to be somewhat dangerous when you push the limits with a bunch of competitive athletes. There've been close calls in Murph and other events.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, me too. That's sport, but I wouldn't say that the games is inherently dangerous either, because we would have a lot more issues over the years. When you talk about Murph as an isolated event being programmed, obviously other factors like the heat, like other things, should be taken into account, but the workout itself reasonably safe. So when you have to do when you look at the totality of the circumstances coming into what makes each event and then how they compound on each other, of course, in sport, there's always risk. Every year, I'm a big football guy. Half of my team is out on IR by week 9. Like,
right.
That's me too. That risk comes with it. And when I say safety, I mean, typically this is the first time we've ever had to talk about life and death in a real way. Is heat stroke from Murph serious? Hell yeah, it's serious. Did they make a big mistake running that in the middle of the day in California? Hell yeah, they did. And when they brought it back, they changed it. They moved it to early morning, and there was no issue after that. No real issue. Obviously, fatigue and stuff when you're competing. But those details are a big part of it. And of course, being a competitive athlete, to an extent, you accept and understand risk. That is part of it. That's part of sport. And so Yeah, outside of this, we wouldn't be talking about, if this incident didn't happen this year, we would not be talking about how dangerous the CrossFit Games are. It would not be a discussion. I don't think.
I agree 100%. 100%. There's been, I mean, so many people have passed out and this and that. Like, if this hadn't happened, I just agree 100%. It's, they're out there doing,
Yeah, and
we're
what
trying to
sport
find the
isn't?
fittest. Yeah.
What sport isn't inherently dangerous?
I don't know if there's not a sport where there hasn't been some sort of tragedy, even if it's a heart issue on the floor. It's a high exertion level. Some sport, just all sports have high exertion level. And besides that, you've got other crazy stuff like bobsledding and this and that. Like, that's what sports is. There's a danger to it. Football has danger to it. Okay. So, going forward, we can go either way with this, what you think or what you think is going to happen, what you think should happen or what you think will happen. But what's going to happen with, let's just assume for a moment that the CrossFit Games are going to continue. There'll be changes. Do you think that they do open water swim ever again? Yeah, let's leave it at that.
That's tough. I don't think I can answer that at this point.
Yeah.
I just don't even know what the fallout of this entire scope of this investigation and blowback is going to be. It could go so many directions. So I don't even want to.
But they should. But how about this? They should be able to, right? You can do an open water swim and do it safely. If they don't do it, it will be, and there might not even be anything wrong with this. It would be a business decision, right?
I just think that you could do it in a pool. I just think that they're not going to open themselves up to it again. Yeah. So I think if they want to keep swimming as part of a reasonable test, I think they'll just say, you know what, for the next decade, we're going to the pool if we're going to do it. Because if we even get to that point, I just don't think that they need to, aside from whether they're arguing safety or not, why rehash that stuff? Like, again, remember Lazar, honor him, like never forget what has happened, but you don't need to keep making people feel bad about it over and over again either.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's been a year where we didn't have any swimming, and I remember people complaining
recently too.
Complaining about that in terms of the program. So I think it's safe to say they'll take at least a year off from any type of open water swim. But I think personally, I don't see anything wrong with them bringing back open water swimming. You just got to fucking make sure you learn from this tragic incident and make sure it doesn't happen again. And, Jan brought up a good point that I kind of fully agree with. Like, dude, look at the statistics in terms of Ironman swimmers. 23, I think I read, died last year. They still perform Ironmans. They still do them.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a question I had too. I don't know. I didn't have time to look it up. I thought I heard that they're contracted next year. I could be totally wrong. Do either of you guys know what the situation is with Fort Worth? If they're locked in at all, or anybody in the chat, if you guys don't.
I forget where I heard it from, but I heard that they had a year. But that didn't sound right when I heard it.
I thought
you don't typically only sign 1 year contracts.
Yeah, I thought it was 2 years. I'd have. Well, if it was a year by year thing, it would be hard for me personally to see them going back with what happened. Am I off base in that? Would they go back there even with everything that happened? That's just hard for me to picture for some reason.
Why wouldn't they?
It's hard. It's hard to think about because, again, we're still having a very emotional conversation. It's hard to think about things through that lens currently. So it's a good question in a few months.
But like, do you think that because now that venue's cursed, like what's your logic behind them not?
No, and again, this is totally just off of feeling like, well, first of all, what if Fort Worth doesn't want them back or Dickies or whatnot because of the publicity surrounding, it wasn't like everywhere, but there was certainly local publicity about somebody dying during an event. And there's a lot of stuff going around about them being underprepared. So I don't know if they'll be necessarily.
There was that massive shooting at that Vegas country concert. Yeah. Do they not have concerts there anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to have it there. In my mind, it was hard to see them going back there. And I was thinking more of a perspective of whether or not they would want the publicity, but you might be right.
I mean, let's be real. If they go back, they're not going back in that lake. No one's
Well,
going to
yeah.
want to go
That's a
over
good
there,
point.
right?
No.
So
Yeah.
things will be different if they do go back. But it's a reasonable conversation to have. I just think that we'll have to wait a little further along in the process to see what those conversations look like in the future. Because you're right, there may be a huge lawsuit that completely kills it there. Like the contract may be void because it's under litigation. Like who knows what could happen? Don't know.
This is a big one. That I'd said I wanted to get back to. So the future of, Dave Castro, Don Fowl, obviously a pretty broad question. What do you guys think happens there? What do you guys think happens with Dave?
You want me to go first?
Yes, you go first. Because
I
I
know
don't
Seth,
want
here.
Seth,
So.
Seth, you are very, I could tell you're very patient and you like to process things. I'm very opinionated and impulsive, so I'm sorry to put you in that position, but I do
It's
have an
okay.
opinion. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Seth,
it's
is
okay.
your gym affiliated?
All 5 of my gyms are affiliated.
Oh,
And do you have to pay a fee for each one?
Yep, $4,500 a piece.
Yeah, see, that's nuts. I asked that. I asked that because when I visited my girlfriend in Sydney, we visited an awesome gym, and they have 3 locations, and they all pay for an affiliate fee there. And I meant to ask Dave on one of his weekend reviews if there's some sort of program that would incentivize gym owners to open more locations and expand their brand and the CrossFit brand without having to pay those fees. But sidetracked on that. I honestly would hate to see this. I don't want it to happen, but I do believe, unfortunately, that either Dave or Don, I don't think both of them, but one of them is going to get either forced to resign, step down, whatever the hell that means. I don't think we're going to see the word fired, but we're going to see some sort of stupid statement, such and such stepped down, such and such resigned. I think we're going to see something like that.
Seth?
I think that is one of the possibilities. Yeah, a resignation. I think that's more likely than a firing. I think it's just an easier way to frame it in the public as someone's taking accountability and stepping down for it, whether they want to or not, or whether their hand is forced or not. I don't know that it's going to happen, but it is one of the paths in my mind that may take place. I am so ripped right down the middle on this. I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't even know what is right at this point. So I'm still thinking yeah.
I think
usually I'm freaking opinionated and debating people and stuff. And this is the one time I'm just like,
yeah, no, I respect
man, I gotta sit and I just gotta watch.
Sometimes you gotta sit.
But who knows? We also have to take in the fact that like I know how much this means to Dave. I know how much the games means to him. Who knows? He may want to step down. He may be like,
it's another possibility.
This is my baby. This is my child. And someone tragically died at something that I run. I have my heart poured into. He may be reflecting huge right now emotionally with his family. And there might be a point where he's just like, I don't know if I can keep doing this after what happened. So he may, who knows?
Totally.
I think that it kind of depends on whether or not the ownership gets on board with Don or not, right? I think if they're on board with Don, it seems like justice has to be doled out in the public eye, or companies feel that way. Somebody's got to pay when something goes wrong. In my mind, if they support Don, then I think that there's a high probability that Don will then say somebody's got to go.
And who knows? Like, we know they're trying to sell. Like, they're trying to sell the company. What if, like, yeah, they're like everyone knows they're prepping to sell, and it's like, who knows?
They might value just went way down.
It did. So they might be like, hey, like, we know this, presenting it to another company, like, hey, we know this happened, but they're no longer with the company. They're no longer with the company. We're going to ask them to step down.
Sacrificial lamb, almost.
It could be, it could be just another part of the ploy to sell the company.
Yep. Okay, 2 last questions. One of these will be another one that Seth, you probably will want some more information on.
That's all right.
So I'm going to start with you first, but I really do appreciate it. I don't sit in the silence enough, so I'm learning from you. I like watching people. I like learning, and I respect this approach. All right, so my question is, do the CrossFit Games end up looking drastically different after this, including do they survive or look drastically different? Or do you think that there's a chance with, depending on what comes out, that we make some changes and it can continue in a similar form as it has been?
Yeah, I do think things will look different, but it may not be solely due to this incident. Things were already changing and things were probably going to evolve in some way, shape, or form prior to this over the next 3 to 5 years, just in terms of what their CrossFit Games product looks like, right? They trimmed out the masters and teens this year. They've had plenty of feedback that the team events are not what they once were. And so they're probably deciding what direction to take that. And so those changes, that stuff will continue to be part of the conversation to how we're refining this CrossFit Games product from a company standpoint. And then from this incident, there will have to be some kind of changes that are made, that are very public and put out there, just whether they're massive or not, so that public perception can start to believe that whatever they're doing is trying to do the right things for the athletes, for whatever else. Again, this is highly subject to a lot of factors. And so in short, yes, I think things will change and I think things will continue to evolve, maybe now at a faster rate given what happened. But I think that was inevitable anyway. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Anything on that, Mike?
I think the games will continue, but will they continue under the guise of, or under the umbrella of CrossFit, or will an outside company come and take it over, buy it potentially, and CrossFit just focuses on the affiliate side of it, and maybe CrossFit is looking now potentially to look to sell it to some outside company, like, hey, we don't want to deal with this anymore. I think the PFAA, whatever, the Flag Football Association, whatever the heck that thing's called, will be involved more in terms of the safety stuff. Obviously, I think they're going to be more heavily involved in what happens from there on. I was reading Samuel's comment, the games will have to be more standardized. I don't know what that means. It already is pretty standardized. And the events known more in advance to properly prepare for safety, I think that's not going to happen either. I think people in the background they already probably do look at the safety standards, I'm assuming, of each event. Hence, that's how some of these events are getting leaked beforehand, because people know about them. They test them. It's not like they just don't have safety measures already in place. But in terms of the future of the CrossFit Games, I think it's likely that we do still see it, but it's going to be under some other umbrella. It's not going to be CrossFit running it.
Yeah. My last one is this. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. A crazy, crazy way they could do this. And I had talked about this long before this had come up.
Yeah,
when they were speculating. No, thanks. I'm not prepared for that. I'll write some workouts, but that's about it. A wild way to run the season and to take out some of the drama that kind of leads up to the games would be to release the entire map of the season. Open, quarters, semis, games. They're pre-programmed to an extent. You don't have to give every single detail, but now you're choosing how you're going to train to represent yourself across this 4-step test, across these 30 total events to be the fittest. And now you can't say that you were unprepared or something, and you have this small window of time from February to August to do what you want to do, using what methodology you want to do, to have this test across all these different, domains and things. And so I'm not saying that'll ever happen, but that's an interesting way to think about it, because it's not like you're giving someone 5 years to prep for the test. The test changes every year. You just give the answers early, so people can't say they're not prepared. They've had everything. It'll never happen. It doesn't fit that way, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
Okay, so this is my last question, and then we'll get you guys out of here. If the CrossFit Games were ever to go away, for the average everyday person going to your affiliate, or even just a CrossFit gym that's not an affiliate, if the games went away, would that aspect for the average CrossFitter change, do you think? Or do you think it wouldn't change much at all?
No. I used to coach for for Souza at his gym in CrossFit Livermore, and dude, none of them really. I mean, to his point too, he said it many times on the show. None of them knew. Most of them don't know what the fuck.
Nobody at my gym has any idea what's going on. They don't. I say people to them, like names. There's a few that they know, but I talk about top 10 people. No, don't know who that is. They're very disconnected from it.
Yeah, I across all my gyms, they're all very different cultures and communities. They're all very, very different in terms of their level of competitiveness and what they care about the games aspect. Some of my gyms don't know who Dave Castro is. Never heard of him. Don't care. They're showing up for class tomorrow morning with their friends. Other gyms are affected a little more. I'm getting messages from some of the members, mostly just that, oh, what a tragedy. This is sad. I heard about it. But none of them are like, man, I'm really thinking about canceling my membership because this happened. Like not a single one across 5 of my locations. And I think, yeah, I don't have to go in anymore.
Yeah.
So I just think people are not as connected to the games maybe as they once were at some point. People just still really want to work out and love the community aspect of the style of fitness.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, 1 year ago, I just started obsessing over CrossFit and the professional side in the last year. A year ago, I don't think I knew who Dave Castro was. And like when I'm at my gym now that I've gotten into it a lot and tried to catch up a lot, it's crazy to me how small a part of CrossFit the games actually are. But I do love the game, so I absolutely want them to continue.
Yeah,
it's my favorite sport.
What's funny is Siobhan Jackson. That comment, I actually wonder that too. Like sometimes when I see everybody go to the games, I'm like, who are these? Like sometimes I'm like, who are these people? Because like at the affiliate I train out of now, the majority of them don't know much about the games. I think if I were to ask them, none of them watch the games. Right?
Yep.
So yeah, sometimes Siobhan Jackson. Sometimes I wonder that same thing. Like
it's just a smaller part of their lives. It's their fitness regimen. Their lives are their immediate family, their immediate community. And the CrossFit Games, they're not competing. It's just not something that they're interested in. They just want to feel better and get fitter. And so and that's great. So yeah, it actually is an okay thing that they're that separate.
And then also everyone asking me why I don't coach for Souza anymore. It's like a 40-minute drive for me. I live in San Jose and he's in Livermore.
That's right.
And I loved his gym. Like I loved coaching there, but I just financially, the gas, the drive, and then I got another job offer somewhere else closer. So I just couldn't do it anymore, unfortunately. But I miss the hell out of his gym. It's amazing. He has such an amazing affiliate.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. I only talked to him once. He was in the media area at the lake and told my friend Ty what was going on, who told me. I didn't know for like 30 minutes. So it was kind of crazy, but what do we end on here? What's going forward? I really want to hear Seth on this because you've talked about what we need to do going forward. So I just love to hear you close it out on how we move forward and what we do.
And in the immediacy anyway, just take a deep breath and start having some empathy towards other people in the community. We're literally ripping ourselves apart from the inside out aggressively, and it's still going on. Disagree all you want, but understand that everyone is dealing with the same incident at the same time, and they're all trying to figure it out. So ripping each other apart is about the worst thing you could do versus hearing somebody out, maybe presenting your side of it and then letting people sit on it. And then after some time, again, emotions will pass and we can have real discussions as to what a true long-term next step will be for us as a sport and a community. I think that's about it.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, people got to remember, the CrossFit community, we're a family and families fight.
That's
families
exactly
unfortunately rip each other apart, and sometimes brothers, end up fist fighting sometimes and sisters claw each other's eyes out. But at the end of the day, a few weeks go by, you guys send each other a text message saying, hey man, I'm sorry for the way I acted. And, I love you. You're my brother. You're my sister. Let's hug it out. Let's, reunite. And I think eventually the CrossFit community will get to that point where as the emotions settle down, they realize how much they truly love each other, how much they love the methodology, and honestly, how much they still do love the sport and they still love watching these athletes, go out there and compete and see who the fittest man or woman on earth is. And I think we'll eventually get to that point. And, if you're still trying to find a way to deal with all this, hit up Seth and he'll give you some great workouts hit up
That's
Jump
right.
Ship Training. You know,
That's right.
if you're looking
Thanks, man.
for a way to kind of get fit and deal with your anxieties through all this. You know, he's an amazing programmer. And hit up Taylor Self. He's actually probably, ironically enough, had some of the greatest insight in terms of all of this because of what he's gone through in terms of grief in his life, losing his father. And I think one of the, like, it hit me like a fucking punch in the chest when he said, like, hey man, I wish, looking back, no one judged me for the things I said and did when dealing with grief. And so I try to really, when I look through social media and see the comments, you know, on the games page and other athletes' pages, I try to repeat what Taylor said in my head, you know, and not kind of jump into conversations I shouldn't be jumping into. So go by those words, you know, and
some restraint, right? Some
Yep.
restraint. I'm an impulsive guy, but even I've been really careful to try to make sure I don't type something that I'm going to regret. So like when you can disagree, people are opinionated, but let's do our best, at least everybody in this chat, to set an example by when we disagree, to just do it respectfully. That's it, man. Like Pool Boy said, we really are a family. I hadn't known that in a little while. I knew that in California at the gym I was at. When we moved to Kansas, I'm at a really small gym. It's a non-affiliate, but what I rediscovered at the games, which is a big deal for me, is that CrossFit is a family. Like, people were there for you. We have a common goal, and that bonds us together. And a lot of people give a crap. So let's be respectful. I will end it on that. Thanks so much, guys. Do me a favor, guys. I am newer, so it's huge if you guys subscribe. Also, check out Seth. His videos are awesome. Subscribe to him. And Pool Boy has an Instagram with some pretty cool stuff. So check that out as well.
I'm going live in about an hour if anyone cares too. So
I will be there. Let's everybody
Jump Ship training
migrate.
channel.
Jump Ship from this podcast.
Hey, listen.
Jump Ship training.
Onto Jump Ship.
We're going to talk about dealing with grief.
Right.
So that's what we're going to talk about.
Beautiful. So what you're going to do is hit that subscribe button. It's somewhere. I have no idea where it is. And then you're going to pull up his live stream so you have it ready to go. Set your alarm and we'll all be there. Thanks, guys. It was really fun. Appreciate it. Fun in the chat. Deep with you guys. Very deep.
I always go deep.